A father abandoned his wheelchair-bound son in a remote forest, but the unexpected happened. A fierce wolf approached, but instead of attacking, its behavior shocked everyone. The cold autumn air swept through the Adirondack forest as Jonathan pushed his 12-year-old daughter Emily's wheelchair along the trail. Dried leaves and broken branches covered their path, making each step feel heavier than the last. Emily couldn't shake off the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Her father, usually warm and engaging, hadn't looked her in the eyes since they left the cabin that morning. If this story caught your interest, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give it a like. Let us know which city you're watching us from. Stay tuned. She studied his face, trying to understand the strange behavior that had taken over him. His movements seemed mechanical, calculated, as if every push of her wheelchair was part of some difficult decision he had already made. The silence between them grew more uncomfortable with each passing minute, but Emily couldn't bring herself to ask what was troubling him. The morning had started normally enough at her grandfather Richard's cabin. They had set out for what was supposed to be a routine walk through the familiar forest paths. But as they ventured deeper into the woods, Emily noticed they were taking unfamiliar turns, moving away from their usual routes. The trees around them grew denser, their branches intertwining overhead to create shadows that danced across the forest floor. Emily wanted to reach out and touch her father's hand, to ask him why he seemed so distant, but something in his demeanor kept her silent. The weight of unspoken words hung heavy in the air between them. Jonathan's footsteps crunched against the fallen leaves, creating a rhythm that seemed to echo the tension building in Emily's chest. She noticed how his hands gripped the handles of her wheelchair too tightly, his knuckles white with pressure. The forest seemed to close in around them, the trees standing like silent witnesses to their strange journey. When they reached an isolated clearing surrounded by tall, imposing trees, Jonathan stopped abruptly. The sudden stillness made Emily's heart race. She watched as her father adjusted her coat, his movements slow and deliberate. Without explanation, he took several steps backward, his eyes fixed on a point somewhere beyond the trees. Emily's confusion turned to fear as she watched him retreat further. She could hear him muttering something under his breath, but the words were lost in the whisper of the wind through the branches. Before she could find her voice to question him, before she could understand what was happening, Jonathan turned and disappeared into the thick forest, leaving her alone in the clearing. The weight of solitude fell upon Emily instantly. The cold air became sharper, more biting as she sat there trying to process what had just happened. Her mind struggled to make sense of her father's actions. When she finally gathered the strength to call out to him, only the echo of her own voice answered back. The wind whistled through the branches, and the forest seemed to grow around her, closing in with an oppressive silence. Emily tried to maneuver her wheelchair, but the uneven ground of the clearing made movement difficult. She was trapped, surrounded by the towering trees that now seemed more threatening than majestic. As panic began to rise in her throat, something caught her attention. A movement at the edge of her vision made her turn her head sharply. There, in the growing shadows of the forest, two golden eyes gleamed. They were fixed on her, watching with an intensity that made her breath catch. From the darkness emerged a black wolf, larger than any she had ever imagined. Its presence was commanding, majestic, yet there was no aggression in its bearing. The wolf stood perfectly still, observing her with an intelligence that seemed almost human. Emily found herself staring back, caught in the creature's golden gaze. Meanwhile, back at the small cabin, Richard began to worry about his son and granddaughter's prolonged absence. As concern grew into urgency, he searched for any signs of their plans for the day. The discovery of Emily's untouched suitcase sent a wave of unease through him. Something wasn't right. Drawing on his years of experience as a forest ranger, Richard knew he needed to act quickly. He understood the forest's ways, its paths, and its dangers. As he prepared to search for them, his trained eye caught sight of the wheelchair tracks leading away from the cabin. But what he found as he followed their trail made his blood run cold, strange symbols carved into the trees, marking a path he had never seen before. In the clearing, Emily remained frozen in place, her eyes locked with the wolf's. As she watched, the magnificent creature began to move with purpose, using its paws to clear away obstacles around her wheelchair. Despite her fear, Emily realized this was no ordinary wolf. It moved with a deliberation that spoke of something far beyond animal instinct, creating a path as if it understood exactly what she needed. At the cabin, Richard's ranger instincts took over as he examined the area around the property. His trained eyes followed the distinct tracks left by Emily's wheelchair, noticing how they veered off from their usual paths into a less traveled section of the forest. As he began his search, he discovered something that made him pause. Unusual symbols carved into the trees, unlike anything he'd seen in his years as a forest ranger. The markings appeared to follow a pattern, leading deeper into the woods. Richard's experience told him these weren't ordinary trail markers or signs left by hikers. These symbols held a different quality, something ancient and purposeful in their design. He traced his fingers over the carved patterns, feeling their weathered edges, wondering how he had never noticed them before, despite knowing these woods like the back of his hand. In the clearing, Emily was beginning to understand that the black wolf before her was unlike any creature she had ever encountered. As it worked methodically to clear a path around her wheelchair, she observed its movements with growing fascination. The wolf showed an understanding of her situation that seemed impossible for an animal, carefully moving branches and clearing obstacles that would have hindered her wheelchair's progress. The wolf's golden eyes occasionally met hers, showing an intelligence that both comforted and intrigued her. Despite her initial fear, Emily felt an inexplicable sense of safety in the creature's presence. As the wolf guided her, she began to notice more symbols carved into the surrounding trees, each one distinct yet clearly connected to the others in some mysterious way. Their journey through the forest took on a rhythm as the wolf led and Emily followed. The uneven ground that had initially trapped her in the clearing became more manageable under the wolf's guidance. It seemed to know exactly which path would be easiest for her wheelchair to navigate, choosing routes that avoided the most challenging terrain. As they moved, Emily's attention was drawn to something partially buried in the soil. There, half hidden among the fallen leaves, lay an ancient-looking pulsera. Her heart quickened as she noticed it bore the same mysterious symbols she had seen on the trees. When she reached down to retrieve it, the bracelet seemed to respond to her touch, emitting a soft glow that pulsed gently in the forest's dim light. The moment she slipped the bracelet onto her wrist, something extraordinary happened. The symbols etched into its surface began to illuminate, creating a subtle radiance that seemed to reach out to the matching marks on the nearby trees. The wolf, noticing this phenomenon, became even more attentive, its golden eyes fixed on the glowing bracelet with renewed interest. Meanwhile, Jonathan wandered through another part of the forest, tormented by visions he couldn't escape. In his pocket, he carried an old photograph of Emily, its reverse side marked with the same symbols that now seemed to be everywhere he looked. The visions showed him glimpses of his daughter, surrounded by shadows, with bright symbols floating around her. The weight of his decision to leave her haunted him, yet he felt driven by these mysterious signs and portents. Each time he saw a symbol carved into a tree, it seemed to match perfectly with those on the back of the photograph. The visions grew stronger in these moments, showing him fragments of something larger, something he couldn't quite comprehend. These images had been coming to him for weeks, growing more intense until they had driven him to this desperate act. Richard, following the trail of symbols, came across an abandoned cabin he had never seen before. Inside, scattered across an old desk, lay documents that caught his immediate attention. As he read through the yellowed pages, his eyes widened at the mention of something called the Forest Guardian. The texts spoke of a mysterious figure that protected the vulnerable and guided the lost, while also testing those who entered its domain. The connection between the symbols he had been following and the Guardian became clear as he studied the ancient documents. According to the writings, the Guardian was known to mark its territory with sacred symbols, creating a network of protective signs throughout the forest. These markings served as both a guide for those in need and a test for those who would enter the Guardian's realm. As Richard absorbed this information, he could hear distant sounds echoing through the forest, the rustle of movement, the snap of branches. Something was happening in his beloved woods, something that connected his granddaughter, his son, and these ancient markings in ways he was only beginning to understand. With the document secured, he knew he had to continue his search, now armed with knowledge that made the symbol's presence less mysterious, but somehow more significant. Outside the abandoned cabin, the forest seemed to pulse with an energy that Richard had never noticed before. The symbols on the trees appeared more prominent, as if acknowledging his newfound understanding of their purpose. As an experienced ranger, he had always known the forest held secrets, but never had he imagined anything like this, a hidden world of ancient guardians and mysterious powers that had somehow entwined itself with his family's fate. Each time Emily and the wolf approached a new symbol carved into the trees, her bracelet pulsed with increasing intensity. The ancient jewelry seemed to resonate with these mysterious markings, creating an unexplainable connection between her and the patterns that marked their path through the forest. The wolf, ever vigilant, appeared to understand the significance of this interaction, guiding her with even greater purpose. As they progressed deeper into the woods, Emily noticed how the symbols appeared to form a pattern, each one leading to the next like breadcrumbs through the forest. The black wolf moved with deliberate grace, pausing occasionally to ensure she was following, its golden eyes reflecting an ancient wisdom that seemed to transcend its animal nature. The wolf's behavior continued to amaze Emily. It worked systematically, clearing obstacles from their path with an almost human-like understanding of her wheelchair's limitations. When faced with particularly challenging terrain, the creature would find alternative routes, always keeping them within sight of the marked trees that seemed to guide their journey. Meanwhile, Richard had emerged from the abandoned cabin with the most crucial documents tucked safely away. The information about the Forest Guardian had given him a new perspective on the strange events unfolding in his woods. As he followed the trail of symbols, he encountered something unexpected, a massive bear blocking his path. The tense moment was broken by the sudden appearance of the same black wolf that had been guiding Emily. The wolf's intervention was swift and decisive, causing the bear to retreat without conflict. This encounter only served to reinforce what Richard had read about the Guardian's protective nature, adding another layer to the mystery he was trying to unravel. In another part of the forest, Jonathan found himself in an area marked by burned trees. The charred trunks created stark contrasts against the otherwise vibrant forest, and here too he found symbols that matched those on the back of Emily's photograph. His visions intensified in this place, showing him images of his daughter surrounded by patterns of light and shadow. The photo he carried had become more than just a picture. It was a key to something larger, something he couldn't fully comprehend. The symbols on its reverse side seemed to pulse with an energy that matched the markings he found in the forest. Each vision brought new fragments of understanding, yet the complete picture remained frustratingly out of reach. As Emily and the wolf continued their journey, they came across a series of trees that formed a natural archway. The symbols here were different, more complex than the others they had seen. Emily's bracelet responded with an unprecedented brilliance, its light creating intricate patterns that danced across the forest floor. The wolf stood particularly alert at this spot, as if they had reached a significant milestone in their journey. Through the filtered sunlight, Emily began to notice how the symbols appeared to be interconnected, forming a larger pattern that extended throughout the forest. Her bracelet seemed to reveal new markings that had been invisible before, each one adding to the complex network of signs that surrounded them. Richard's expertise as a forest ranger, combined with his newfound knowledge of the Guardian, allowed him to track the various paths that converged through the woods. He began to understand that the symbols weren't randomly placed. They formed a sophisticated system of markers, each with its own significance in the Guardian's design. The forest itself seemed to come alive with energy as the three separate journeys began to converge. The symbols glowed more intensely, the wind whispered through the trees with greater purpose, and even the scattered beams of sunlight appeared to guide the way. Something ancient and powerful was orchestrating their movements, bringing them closer to a destination that remained hidden but felt increasingly significant. Emily's bracelet continued to respond to each new symbol they encountered, its light growing stronger and more focused. The wolf's behavior became more deliberate, its movements suggesting that they were approaching something important. The creature's golden eyes seemed to hold secrets that were slowly being revealed, one symbol at a time, as they made their way through the mysterious forest. The convergence of their paths was drawing near, guided by the ancient force that had set these events in motion. Richard's understanding of the Guardian, Jonathan's cryptic visions, and Emily's connection to the symbols through her bracelet were all parts of a larger design, one that was carefully orchestrated by the mysterious presence that watched over the forest. Emily felt the bracelet's energy growing stronger as she and the wolf approached what appeared to be a circular formation of stone markers. Each stone bore the same mysterious symbols she had seen throughout the forest, but here they seemed more deliberate, more purposeful in their arrangement. The wolf moved with increased alertness, its golden eyes scanning their surroundings as if aware they were reaching a significant point in their journey. The stones seemed to respond to the bracelet's glow, creating an intricate pattern of light that connected each symbol to the next. Emily watched in wonder as the ground beneath them began to reveal its own set of markings, previously hidden beneath years of fallen leaves and forest debris. The wolf worked methodically to clear away the covering, revealing more of the ancient design with each careful movement. Meanwhile, Jonathan had found his way to an area where the traces of Emily's wheelchair suddenly vanished. The burned trees surrounding him bore symbols that perfectly matched those on the back of the photograph he carried. His visions were becoming clearer now, showing him images of Emily surrounded by patterns of light. The forest seemed to pulse with an energy he could almost touch, guiding him towards something he couldn't yet understand. Richard's ranger experience proved invaluable as he navigated through the complex network of marked trees. His encounter with the bear and the wolf's intervention had reinforced everything he had read about the Forest Guardian in those ancient documents. Each step brought him closer to understanding the connection between the symbols, his family, and the mysterious force that seemed to be orchestrating their movements. The pattern of symbols led all three of them toward the same destination, though none fully understood the significance of their convergence. Emily's bracelet pulsed with increasing intensity, creating ribbons of light that seemed to dance between the marked trees. The wolf remained faithfully by her side, its presence both protective and purposeful. As they drew nearer to the circle of stones, Emily noticed how the symbols appeared to shift and change in the dappled sunlight. The bracelet's glow created new patterns on the forest floor, connecting the ancient markings in ways that seemed to tell a story she was only beginning to understand. The wolf's behavior became more focused, As if it sensed they were approaching something significant, Jonathan's visions grew stronger as he followed the trail of symbols. Each marked tree seemed to pulse with energy that matched the patterns on the photograph. The forest around him felt alive with purpose, guiding him toward a clearing he could sense but not yet see. The weight of his earlier decision to leave Emily began to transform into something else, an understanding that perhaps he had been part of something larger than himself. Richard discovered that the symbols formed a complex network throughout the forest, all leading toward a central point. His knowledge of the Guardian, gleaned from the documents in the abandoned cabin, helped him understand that these markings were more than just trail markers. They were part of an ancient system of protection and guidance. The wolf led Emily through the final stretch of their journey, clearing a path that wound between the ancient stones. Each step brought them closer to the center of the formation, where the symbols seemed to converge in a complex pattern. The bracelet's light grew stronger, creating a web of illuminated lines that connected one stone to the next. Jonathan emerged from the tree line just as Richard approached from another direction. The three found themselves drawn to the same spot, where the wolf had guided Emily. The ancient stones stood as silent witnesses to their reunion, their symbols now glowing with an intensity that matched the light from Emily's bracelet. The forest seemed to hold its breath as they came together, the wolf standing sentinel beside Emily's wheelchair. The patterns of light and shadow created by the bracelet and the stones formed intricate designs on the ground around them, telling a story that was only beginning to unfold. Something invisible yet powerful observed their gathering, as if measuring the strength of their connection and the depth of their understanding. The Guardian's presence, though unseen, filled the clearing with an energy that was almost tangible. The symbols on the stones, the trees, and Emily's bracelet pulsed in unison, creating a harmony of light and shadow that spoke of ancient powers and timeless wisdom. The wolf's golden eyes reflected the glow, its gaze moving between the three humans as if waiting for them to understand the significance of their convergence. The circle of ancient stones towered around them, each surface etched with the mysterious symbols that had guided their separate journeys. Emily sat in her wheelchair, the glowing bracelet on her wrist creating patterns of light that danced across the stone surfaces. The black wolf remained steadfast beside her, its golden eyes alert and watchful as Jonathan and Richard stood at opposite sides of the circle. Jonathan's hands trembled as he held the old photograph, its symbolic markings now pulsing with the same rhythm as the stones around them. His visions, which had driven him to such desperate actions earlier that day, seemed to align with the reality before him. The shadows he had seen surrounding Emily in his visions were now replaced by streams of light emanating from her bracelet. Richard clutched the documents from the abandoned cabin, his ranger's experience helping him maintain composure despite the extraordinary scene unfolding before him. The texts about the Forest Guardian suddenly felt more real than ever as he watched the interplay of light and shadow around them. The wolf's presence, so central to the ancient legends he had read about, confirmed every word in those yellowed pages. Emily looked between her father and grandfather, feeling the bracelet's energy intensifying with each passing moment. The symbols on the stones began to respond to her presence, their etchings filling with a soft luminescence that matched the glow from her wrist. The wolf moved closer to her, its fur brushing against her wheelchair as if offering silent support. The ground beneath them revealed more patterns as the bracelet's light grew stronger. Ancient markings, long hidden beneath years of forest growth, became visible in an expanding circle around them. The wolf seemed to understand the significance of this revelation, its attention focused on the emerging symbols with an almost reverent intensity. Richard stepped forward, recognition dawning in his eyes as he matched the patterns emerging on the ground with illustrations from the Guardian's documents. These weren't random designs, they formed an intricate language, a message left by the ancient protector of these woods. The wolf's gaze met his, and for a moment Richard understood that this creature was more than just an animal. It was a manifestation of the Guardian's presence. Jonathan watched as the symbols from his visions materialized in the light around them. The weight of his earlier decision to abandon Emily pressed heavily upon him, but now he began to understand. The visions hadn't been driving him away from his daughter. They had been guiding them all to this moment, this gathering in the ancient circle. The bracelet's glow intensified, creating bridges of light between the standing stones. Each connection revealed new symbols, adding layers to the message being revealed. Emily felt a surge of energy through the bracelet, not frightening but reassuring, like a gentle hand offering guidance. The wolf's golden eyes reflected the light, creating an almost ethereal appearance that matched the ancient power flowing through the clearing. Around them, the forest seemed to pulse with its own rhythm, as if the trees themselves were participating in whatever ceremony was unfolding. The symbols on the stones, the ground, and Emily's bracelet appeared to move and shift, telling a story that transcended ordinary understanding. The wolf's presence anchored them in this extraordinary moment, its calm demeanor suggesting that everything was proceeding as it should. The Guardian's invisible presence grew stronger, filling the circle with an energy that was almost tangible. Each symbol, whether carved in stone, etched in the earth, or glowing on Emily's bracelet, played its part in a larger design. The three humans and the wolf stood within this ancient pattern, connected by forces they were only beginning to comprehend. Emily's wheelchair, which had seemed so limiting in the forest earlier, now sat at the center of a web of light. The wolf had guided her to exactly the right position, where the bracelet's energy could connect with the stone circle's ancient power. Understanding began to dawn on all of their faces as the purpose of their convergence became clearer. The forest around them fell into a deep silence, as if holding its breath in anticipation. The only movement came from the shifting patterns of light and the occasional stirring of the wolf's fur in a breeze that seemed to come from nowhere. They had been drawn together by the Guardian's design, their separate journeys merging into a single path that led to this moment of revelation. The symbols throughout the stone circle pulsed with increasing intensity as Emily's bracelet continued to respond to their presence. The wolf remained vigilant by her side, its golden eyes reflecting the intricate patterns of light that danced around them. Jonathan and Richard stood transfixed, watching as the ancient markings seemed to come alive with each passing moment. Richard's expertise as a forest ranger had taught him to read signs in nature, but nothing in his years of experience had prepared him for this. The documents he had found in the abandoned cabin spoke of the Guardian's power to unite those who needed guidance, and now he was witnessing it firsthand. The wolf's presence, so central to the legends he had read about, served as living proof of the ancient stories. Jonathan pulled out the old photograph of Emily, its reverse side now glowing with the same intensity as the symbols on the stones. The visions that had haunted him began to make sense. They hadn't been driving him to abandon his daughter, but rather guiding them all to this precise moment. The patterns he had seen in his mind now matched perfectly with those illuminated around them. Emily watched in wonder as her bracelet created connections between the standing stones, each beam of light revealing new symbols that had been hidden from view. The wolf moved with purpose around her wheelchair, its movements seeming to activate different patterns in the ground beneath them. The ancient markings formed a complex network that spread outward from where she sat at the center of the circle. The forest around them had grown still, as if nature itself was watching the unfolding scene. Each symbol on the stones appeared to tell part of a larger story, their meanings slowly becoming clear as they glowed in sequence. The wolf's presence seemed to bridge the gap between the ordinary world and the extraordinary events taking place within the circle. Richard stepped closer to Emily, the documents from the cabin trembling in his hands as he recognized patterns described in the ancient texts. The Guardian's symbols weren't just markers or warnings. They were part of a sophisticated language that had been waiting centuries to be rediscovered. The wolf's golden eyes met his, conveying an understanding that transcended words. As Jonathan moved to join them, the light from Emily's bracelet intensified, creating a web of illuminated lines that connected father, daughter, and grandfather. The wolf stood at attention, its fur seeming to shimmer with the same ethereal energy that filled the circle. The symbols on the ground beneath them began to shift and change, revealing deeper layers of meaning. Emily felt the bracelet's warmth spreading through her arm as more symbols awakened around them. The wolf's careful positioning of her wheelchair now made perfect sense. She sat at the exact center of an ancient pattern that had been waiting to be activated. The connection between the bracelet and the stone circle grew stronger, creating a display of light and shadow that told stories of protection and guidance. The Guardian's presence, though unseen, filled the space with undeniable power. Each symbol, whether carved in stone or glowing from Emily's bracelet, played its part in revealing the purpose behind their gathering. The wolf moved between them with deliberate steps, its role as the Guardian's messenger becoming clearer with each passing moment. Jonathan's earlier actions, driven by visions he hadn't understood, now revealed themselves as part of a larger plan. The photograph he carried had been more than just a trigger for his mysterious visions. It was a key that helped unlock the ancient power contained within the stone circle. The symbols on its reverse side matched perfectly with those now glowing around them. The forest seemed to pulse with renewed energy as the circle's power grew stronger. Emily's bracelet continued to reveal new connections between the symbols, each discovery adding to their understanding of the Guardian's message. The wolf's presence remained constant, its calm demeanor suggesting that everything was unfolding exactly as it should. Around them, the standing stones cast long shadows that seemed to move independently of the sun's position. The symbols carved into their surfaces told stories of protection, guidance, and the eternal connection between the forest and those who needed its help. The wolf's golden eyes reflected the dancing lights, its gaze moving between the three humans as if measuring their readiness for what was yet to come. Inside the stone circle, the ancient symbols continued their mysterious dance of light and shadow. Emily's bracelet pulsed with a steady rhythm, creating patterns that connected with each standing stone. The black wolf remained by her side, its golden eyes reflecting the ethereal displays surrounding them. Richard and Jonathan stood in awe as the forest's ancient power manifested before them. The wolf's attention shifted between the three humans, its movements deliberate and purposeful. Each time it moved, new symbols would illuminate on the ground, creating pathways of light that connected Emily's wheelchair to the standing stones. The bracelet on her wrist seemed to respond to these movements, its glow intensifying with each new revelation. Jonathan held the old photograph in trembling hands, watching as the symbols on its reverse side matched perfectly with those appearing around them. His earlier visions now made sense. They weren't meant to separate him from Emily, but to bring them all together in this sacred space. The weight of guilt from abandoning her earlier began to transform into understanding. Richard studied the scene before him, comparing the glowing symbols to the descriptions in the documents from the abandoned cabin. Everything he had read about the Forest Guardian was materializing before his eyes. The wolf's presence, the ancient markings, and the mysterious power flowing through the circle all aligned with the legends he had discovered. The ground beneath Emily's wheelchair continued to reveal new patterns as the bracelet's light touched different areas. The wolf moved with precision, seeming to activate specific symbols in a predetermined sequence. Each new revelation added another layer to the story being told through these ancient markings. Emily watched in wonder as the bracelet created bridges of light between her and the standing stones. She could feel a connection growing stronger, not just to the ancient symbols, but to her father and grandfather as well. The wolf's protective presence gave her courage as the power within the circle continued to build. The forest around them had become preternaturally still, as if holding its breath in anticipation. The symbols on the stones pulsed with energy that seemed to respond to Emily's bracelet, creating an intricate network of light that spread throughout the circle. The wolf's golden eyes reflected these patterns, its gaze holding secrets yet to be revealed. Richard stepped forward, the documents from the cabin providing context for what they were witnessing. The Guardian's presence, though invisible, was undeniable in the way the symbols responded to their gathering. The wolf's role as messenger and guide became clearer with each passing moment. The light from Emily's bracelet began to change, creating new patterns that seemed to tell a story. The wolf moved to specific points within the circle, its movements triggering responses from the symbols carved into the stones. Jonathan watched as images from his visions appeared in the dancing lights, finally understanding their true meaning. As the power within the circle grew stronger, the connection between the three humans deepened. The wolf's presence served as an anchor, its calm demeanor suggesting that everything was proceeding according to the Guardian's plan. Each symbol that illuminated seemed to strengthen the bonds between them, healing the rifts that had formed. The ancient stones cast shadows that moved against the natural flow of light, creating additional patterns that complemented those emanating from Emily's bracelet. The wolf's attention remained focused on these manifestations, its behavior indicating that each new development was significant to their gathering. The Guardian's invisible presence filled the space with tangible energy, working through the symbols, the wolf, and the ancient stones to bring about something transformative. The bracelet on Emily's wrist continued to pulse with light, revealing new layers of meaning in the patterns that surrounded them all. The circle of stones hummed with ancient energy as Emily's bracelet continued its mysterious communication with the symbols. The wolf stood alert beside her wheelchair, its golden eyes tracking each new pattern of light that emerged from the ground. Richard and Jonathan watched in amazement as the forest's power manifested in ways they never thought possible. The symbols on the stones began to shift and change, their meanings becoming clearer with each passing moment. Emily felt the bracelet's warmth spreading through her arm as it responded to the ancient markings. The wolf moved with purpose, seeming to activate specific patterns that spread across the forest floor like ripples in a pond. Jonathan clutched the old photograph, its symbolic markings now perfectly aligned with those appearing around them. His earlier visions, which had driven him to such desperate actions, now revealed their true purpose. Each symbol that illuminated seemed to ease the burden of guilt he carried for leaving Emily in the clearing. Richard's understanding of the Guardian, informed by the documents from the abandoned cabin, deepened as he watched the interaction between the wolf and the ancient stones. The creature's movements were deliberate, each step triggering new responses from the symbols that surrounded them. The legends he had read about were coming to life before his eyes. The bracelet on Emily's wrist pulsed with increasing intensity, creating connections between the standing stones that formed intricate patterns of light. These patterns seemed to tell a story, one that spoke of protection, guidance, and the unbreakable bonds of family. The wolf's presence added another layer to this narrative, its role as the Guardian's messenger becoming more evident with each passing moment. Around them, the forest had grown extraordinarily quiet, as if nature itself was witnessing something sacred. The symbols carved into the stones responded to Emily's bracelet, creating an elaborate network of light that encompassed the entire circle. The wolf's golden eyes reflected these patterns, its gaze holding wisdom that transcended ordinary understanding. Jonathan stepped closer to Emily, drawn by the pull of the ancient power that flowed through the circle. The visions that had haunted him now served as a bridge to understanding the deeper meaning behind their gathering. Each symbol that illuminated seemed to strengthen the connection between father and daughter, healing the wounds of abandonment. Richard observed the unfolding scene with growing comprehension, the documents from the cabin providing context for the extraordinary events they were experiencing. The Guardian's presence, though invisible, was palpable in the way the symbols responded to their family's reunion. The wolf's calm demeanor suggested that everything was proceeding according to some ancient plan. The ground beneath Emily's wheelchair continued to reveal new patterns as the bracelet's light touched different areas. Each discovery added another piece to the puzzle they were slowly assembling. The wolf moved between them with purpose, its actions seeming to guide their understanding of the symbol's meaning. The standing stones cast shadows that danced independently of the natural light, creating additional layers of meaning in the patterns that surrounded them. The wolf's attention remained fixed on these manifestations, its behavior indicating that each new development was significant to their gathering. Emily felt a deep connection growing stronger, not just to the ancient symbols and the mysterious wolf, but to her father and grandfather as well. The bracelet's power seemed to flow through all of them, creating bonds that transcended their ordinary relationships. The Guardian's presence, working through the symbols and the wolf, was bringing about a transformation they could all feel. The circle of stones pulsed with energy as the ancient power continued to build, revealing new aspects of the Guardian's message with each passing moment. The wolf's golden eyes moved between them, its gaze reflecting the wisdom of ages as it guided them through this extraordinary experience. Together, they stood at the threshold of understanding something profound about their connection to each other and to the mysterious force that had brought them to this sacred place. The light from Emily's bracelet grew more intense, creating intricate webs of illumination that connected each standing stone. The wolf remained vigilant by her wheelchair, its golden eyes reflecting the mysterious patterns that danced around them. In this moment, Jonathan began to understand the true meaning of the visions that had haunted him for so long. Richard held the ancient documents from the cabin, their weathered pages now serving as a guide to the extraordinary scene unfolding before them. The wolf's presence, so central to the legends of the Forest Guardian, confirmed everything he had read. Each movement of the magnificent creature seemed to activate new symbols on the ground, expanding the circle of light that surrounded them. Emily watched as the bracelet responded to each new symbol that appeared, its glow pulsing in rhythm with the patterns carved into the stones. The wolf moved with deliberate purpose, clearing paths between the ancient markers as if following an invisible map. Its behavior suggested an intelligence far beyond that of an ordinary animal, each action precisely calculated to reveal more of the Guardian's message. Jonathan took a tentative step toward his daughter, the photograph in his hand now glowing with the same intensity as the symbols around them. The patterns he had seen in his visions matched perfectly with those illuminated on the forest floor. What had seemed like a force driving him away from Emily now revealed itself as part of a larger plan to bring them all together. The wolf's attention shifted between the three humans, its golden eyes holding secrets that were slowly being revealed. Each time it moved to a new position within the circle, different symbols would illuminate, creating a complex language of light and shadow. The bracelet on Emily's wrist seemed to respond to these changes, its power growing stronger with each new revelation. Richard recognized patterns from the Guardian's documents appearing in the light show around them, The ancient texts had spoken of moments like this, times when the forest's power would manifest to guide and protect those in need. The wolf's presence served as a living bridge between their world and the ancient forces at work in these woods. The ground beneath them continued to reveal new symbols as Emily's bracelet cast its light in expanding circles. The wolf moved with increasing purpose, its actions seeming to guide their understanding of the patterns that surrounded them. Each revelation brought them closer to comprehending the significance of their gathering in this sacred space. Jonathan felt the weight of his earlier actions lifting as he witnessed the power of the forest at work. The visions that had seemed like a curse now revealed themselves as a blessing, guiding them all to this moment of understanding. The wolf's calm presence suggested that even his temporary abandonment of Emily had been part of the Guardian's plan. The ancient stones cast shadows that moved against the natural flow of light, creating additional layers of meaning in the patterns that surrounded them. Emily's wheelchair sat at the center of this supernatural display, the bracelet on her wrist acting as a conduit for powers beyond their understanding. The wolf remained by her side, its golden eyes reflecting the wisdom of ages. Richard studied the unfolding scene with growing comprehension, matching the symbols that appeared with those described in the ancient documents. The Guardian's presence, though invisible, was undeniable in the way the forest responded to their gathering. Each new pattern that emerged seemed to strengthen the bonds between grandfather, father, and daughter. The wolf's movements became more deliberate as the power within the circle intensified. Its golden eyes held knowledge that transcended ordinary understanding, guiding them through this extraordinary experience with patience and purpose. The symbols on the ground, the stones, and Emily's bracelet worked in harmony to reveal truths that had been hidden for generations. As the ancient energy continued to build, the connection between the three humans grew stronger. The wolf's presence anchored them in this moment of revelation, its calm demeanor suggesting that everything was proceeding according to some greater design. Together, they stood witness to something profound, their family bonds being renewed and strengthened by the forest's mysterious power. The stone circle pulsed with ancient power as Emily's bracelet continued to reveal new patterns in the ground around them. The black wolf stood watchful beside her wheelchair, its golden eyes reflecting the mysterious lights that danced between the standing stones. Richard and Jonathan remained transfixed by the unfolding display of supernatural energy that surrounded them. Emily felt the bracelet's warmth spreading through her as it responded to each new symbol that emerged. The wolf moved with practiced grace, its movements triggering reactions from the ancient markings carved into the stones. Each step the creature took seemed to unlock another layer of understanding, bringing them closer to the truth that had drawn them all to this sacred place. Jonathan held the photograph before him, watching as the symbols on its reverse side aligned perfectly with those now glowing on the forest floor. His visions, which had once filled him with confusion and fear, now appeared as pieces of a larger puzzle. The wolf's presence confirmed what his heart was beginning to understand, that even his earlier actions had served some greater purpose. Richard consulted the documents from the abandoned cabin, finding descriptions that matched exactly what they were witnessing. The Forest Guardian's influence was unmistakable in the way the symbols responded to their presence, creating patterns of light that spoke of protection and guidance. The wolf's behavior aligned perfectly with the ancient texts, its role as messenger becoming clearer with each passing moment. The bracelet on Emily's wrist pulsed with increasing intensity, sending out waves of light that connected with each standing stone in turn. The wolf remained close to her, its golden eyes alert to each new manifestation of power. Together, they formed the center of an expanding circle of illumination that seemed to bridge the gap between the ordinary world and something far more ancient and mysterious. Jonathan stepped closer to his daughter, drawn by the pull of the supernatural energies that filled the space. The guilt that had weighed so heavily on his heart began to lift as he witnessed the forest's power at work. Each glowing symbol seemed to speak of forgiveness and renewal, of bonds that could be strengthened rather than broken. The wolf moved with deliberate purpose between them, its actions creating new connections in the pattern of lights that surrounded them. Richard watched in amazement as the creature's movements matched descriptions from the Guardian's documents, bringing ancient prophecies to life before their eyes. The forest itself seemed to respond to their gathering, holding its breath as the power continued to build. Emily's wheelchair sat at the exact center of the stone circle, positioned perfectly to channel the energy flowing through the ancient site. The bracelet's glow intensified with each new revelation, creating bridges of light that connected father, daughter, and grandfather in ways that transcended ordinary understanding. The wolf's presence served as an anchor, its calm demeanor suggesting that everything was unfolding exactly as it should. The symbols on the ground shifted and changed, telling stories of protection, guidance, and the unbreakable bonds of family. Each new pattern that emerged seemed to strengthen the connection between them, healing old wounds and creating new understanding. The wolf's golden eyes reflected these changes, its gaze holding wisdom that spanned centuries. Jonathan's visions had led them to this moment, though he hadn't understood their purpose until now. The photograph he carried had been more than just a trigger for supernatural experiences. It was a key that helped unlock the ancient power contained within the stone circle. The wolf's presence confirmed the authenticity of everything they were witnessing. Richard's knowledge of the forest, combined with the information from the ancient documents, helped them interpret the meaning behind each new symbol that appeared. The Guardian's presence, though invisible, was unmistakable in the way the forest responded to their gathering. Every illuminated pattern brought them closer to understanding the true purpose of their reunion. The wolf's movements became more purposeful as the power within the circle reached new heights. Its golden eyes held secrets yet to be revealed, guiding them through this extraordinary experience with patience and wisdom. Together, they stood at the threshold of understanding something profound about their connection to each other and to the mysterious force that had brought them to this sacred place. The ancient stones resonated with power as the symbols on the ground connected with those on Emily's bracelet. The black wolf stood motionless beside her wheelchair, its golden eyes fixed on the patterns of light that danced through the circle. Richard and Jonathan watched in awe as new revelations began to unfold before them. The bracelet's glow intensified, creating streams of light that flowed between the standing stones like rivers of pure energy. Each new connection revealed more symbols hidden beneath years of forest growth, telling a story that had waited centuries to be discovered. The wolf's presence seemed to amplify these manifestations, its very being attuned to the ancient power that filled the clearing. Jonathan studied the old photograph, now understanding that the symbols on its reverse had been more than just mysterious markings. They were part of a map that had guided them all to this moment. His visions, which had once seemed like a burden, now revealed themselves as glimpses of this destiny. The wolf's golden eyes met his, conveying a wisdom that transcended ordinary understanding. Richard held the documents from the cabin with trembling hands, reading descriptions that perfectly matched the extraordinary scene before them. The Forest Guardian's influence was undeniable now, manifesting through the intricate dance of light and shadow that surrounded them. Each new pattern that emerged aligned with the ancient texts, confirming their authenticity. Emily felt the bracelet's warmth spreading through her entire body as it responded to the stone circle's energy. The wolf moved closer to her wheelchair, its fur brushing against her arm in a gesture of protection and guidance. The symbols beneath them pulsed with increasing intensity, creating waves of light that spread outward like ripples in a mystical pond. The forest around them had grown preternaturally still, as if every tree and creature was witnessing something sacred. The standing stones cast shadows that moved independently of the sun's position, adding another layer to the complex patterns that filled the circle. The wolf's attention shifted between these manifestations, its behavior indicating that each new development was significant. Jonathan stepped closer to Emily, drawn by an invisible force that seemed to flow between them. The guilt of his earlier actions dissolved in the face of this greater purpose, replaced by an understanding that transcended ordinary emotional bonds. The wolf's presence served as a bridge between the physical and spiritual aspects of their reunion. Richard recognized patterns from the Guardian's documents appearing in ever more complex configurations around them. The ancient power that flowed through the forest was revealing itself fully, using symbols and light to communicate truths that words could never express. The wolf's movements became more deliberate, each step triggering new revelations in the illuminated patterns. Emily watched in wonder as her bracelet created connections between herself and the ancient stones, each pulse of light revealing another layer of meaning in the symbols that surrounded them. The wolf remained by her side, its golden eyes reflecting the supernatural display that continued to unfold. Their position at the center of the circle seemed increasingly significant as the power continued to build. The ground beneath them trembled slightly as more symbols emerged from beneath centuries of accumulated forest debris. The wolf moved with increased purpose, its actions seeming to guide the flow of energy that filled the space. Each new pattern that appeared brought them closer to understanding the true nature of their gathering. Jonathan's visions had prepared them for this moment, though none of them could have imagined its full significance. The photograph he carried now pulsed with the same energy that flowed through the stone circle, its symbols perfectly aligned with those that surrounded them. The wolf's presence confirmed that everything was proceeding according to some greater design. The bonds between father, daughter, and grandfather grew stronger with each new revelation, strengthened by the ancient power that flowed through the forest. The wolf's golden eyes held secrets yet to be revealed, guiding them through this extraordinary experience with patience and wisdom. Together, they stood on the brink of understanding something profound about their connection to each other and to the mysterious force that had brought them to this sacred place. The light emanating from Emily's bracelet reached a new intensity, creating an intricate web of illumination that connected every stone in the circle. The black wolf stood alert, its golden eyes reflecting the supernatural display as Richard and Jonathan witnessed the forest's power manifesting in ways they never thought possible. The symbols on the ground began to shift and change, forming new patterns that seemed to tell an ancient story. The wolf moved with deliberate grace between the standing stones, each step triggering reactions from the glowing markings. Emily felt the bracelet's energy flowing through her, creating a connection to the forest that transcended ordinary understanding. Jonathan held the photograph before him, watching as the symbols on its reverse side pulsed in perfect synchronization with those illuminated around them. His visions now made complete sense. They hadn't been meant to separate him from Emily, but to guide them all to this moment of revelation. The wolf's presence confirmed the authenticity of everything they were experiencing. Richard studied the documents from the cabin with renewed understanding. The forest guardian's influence was unmistakable in the way the symbols responded to their gathering. Each new pattern that emerged matched descriptions in the ancient texts, revealing layers of meaning that had been hidden for centuries. The wolf's behavior aligned perfectly with the legends he had discovered. The bracelet on Emily's wrist continued to pulse with energy, sending waves of light that connected with each standing stone in turn. The wolf remained close to her wheelchair, its golden eyes alert to each new manifestation of power. Together, they formed the heart of an expanding circle of illumination that bridged the gap between the ordinary world and something far more mysterious. Jonathan moved closer to his daughter, drawn by the supernatural energies that filled the space. The guilt that had weighed on his heart began to lift as he witnessed the forest's power at work. Each glowing symbol seemed to speak of forgiveness and renewal, of family bonds that could be strengthened rather than broken. The wolf's movements became more purposeful, creating new connections in the pattern of lights that surrounded them. Richard watched in amazement as the creature's actions matched descriptions from the Guardian's documents, bringing ancient prophecies to life before their eyes. The forest itself seemed to respond to their gathering, holding its breath as the power continued to build. Emily's wheelchair sat at the exact center of the stone circle, positioned perfectly to channel the energy flowing through the ancient site. The bracelet's glow intensified with each new revelation, creating bridges of light that connected father, daughter, and grandfather in ways that transcended ordinary understanding. The wolf's presence served as an anchor, its calm demeanor suggesting that everything was unfolding exactly as it should. The symbols on the ground continued to shift and change, telling stories of protection, guidance, and the unbreakable bonds of family. Each new pattern that emerged seemed to strengthen the connection between them, healing old wounds and creating new understanding. The wolf's golden eyes reflected these changes, its gaze holding wisdom that spanned centuries. Jonathan's visions had led them to this moment, though he hadn't understood their purpose until now. The photograph he carried had been more than just a trigger for supernatural experiences. It was a key that helped unlock the ancient power contained within the stone circle. The wolf's presence confirmed the authenticity of everything they were witnessing. Richard's knowledge of the forest, combined with the information from the ancient documents, helped them interpret the meaning behind each new symbol that appeared. The Guardian's presence, though invisible, was unmistakable in the way the forest responded to their gathering. Every illuminated pattern brought them closer to understanding the true purpose of their reunion. The wolf moved between them with increasing purpose, its actions guiding the flow of energy that filled the sacred space. The ancient power that pulsed through the forest was reaching a crescendo, using symbols and light to communicate truths that words could never express. Together, they stood at the threshold of understanding something profound about their connection to each other and to the mysterious force that had brought them to this sacred place. The ancient stones hummed with energy as Emily's bracelet continued its mysterious communion with the forest. The black wolf stood motionless beside her wheelchair, its golden eyes reflecting the intricate patterns of light that danced through the circle. Richard and Jonathan watched in amazement as the power of the Guardian manifested around them with increasing intensity. The symbols beneath their feet pulsed with newfound energy, creating waves of light that rippled outward from Emily's position at the center. The wolf's presence seemed to amplify these manifestations, its very being attuned to the ancient force that filled the clearing. Each new pattern that emerged told another part of the story that had brought them together. Jonathan looked at the old photograph in his hands, now understanding that the symbols on its reverse were part of something far greater than he had imagined. His visions, which had once tormented him, now revealed themselves as pieces of a divine guidance. The wolf's golden eyes met his with an intelligence that seemed to acknowledge this understanding. Richard held the documents from the cabin carefully, comparing the descriptions with the extraordinary scene unfolding before them. The Forest Guardian's influence was undeniable now, manifesting through the intricate dance of light and shadow that surrounded them. each new symbol that appeared aligned perfectly with the ancient texts he had discovered. Emily felt the bracelet's warmth spreading through her entire body as it responded to the stone circle's energy. The wolf moved closer to her wheelchair, its fur brushing against her arm in a gesture of protection and guidance. The symbols beneath them glowed with increasing brightness, creating a web of light that connected all three humans in ways they were only beginning to understand. The forest around them had grown completely still, as if every tree and creature was bearing witness to something sacred. The standing stones cast shadows that moved independently of the sun's position, adding another layer to the complex patterns that filled the circle. The wolf's attention shifted between these manifestations, its behavior indicating that each new development was significant. Jonathan stepped closer to Emily, drawn by an invisible force that seemed to flow between them. The guilt of his earlier actions dissolved completely in the face of this greater purpose, replaced by an understanding that transcended ordinary emotional bonds. The wolf's presence served as a bridge between the physical and spiritual aspects of their reunion. Richard recognized patterns from the Guardian's documents, appearing in ever more complex configurations around them. The ancient power that flowed through the forest was revealing itself fully, using symbols and light to communicate truths that words could never express. The wolf's movements became more deliberate, each step triggering new revelations in the illuminated patterns. Emily watched in wonder as her bracelet created connections between herself and the ancient stones, each pulse of light revealing another layer of meaning in the symbols that surrounded them. The wolf remained faithfully by her side, its golden eyes reflecting the supernatural display that continued to unfold. Their position at the center of the circle seemed increasingly significant as the power continued to build. The ground beneath them trembled slightly as more symbols emerged from beneath centuries of accumulated forest debris. The wolf moved with increased purpose, its actions seeming to guide the flow of energy that filled the space. Each new pattern that appeared brought them closer to understanding the true nature of their gathering. The photograph in Jonathan's hands now pulsed with the same energy that flowed through the stone circle, its symbols perfectly aligned with those that surrounded them. The wolf's presence confirmed that everything was proceeding according to some greater design, a plan that had been set in motion long before any of them were born. The bonds between father, daughter, and grandfather grew stronger with each passing moment, strengthened by the ancient power that flowed through the forest. The wolf's golden eyes held secrets yet to be fully revealed, guiding them through this extraordinary experience with patience and wisdom. Together, they stood on the brink of a revelation that would forever change their understanding of family, faith, and the mysterious forces that guided their lives. The stone circle pulsed with unprecedented power as Emily's bracelet reached new levels of illumination. The black wolf stood vigilant beside her wheelchair, its golden eyes reflecting the complex patterns of light that now filled the entire clearing. Richard and Jonathan watched in awe as the forest's ancient magic manifested with increasing intensity around them. The symbols on the ground had begun to move in ways that defied natural law, creating flowing patterns that seemed to tell stories of past and present. The wolf's movements became more purposeful, each step triggering new reactions from the glowing markings that surrounded them. Emily felt the bracelet's energy coursing through her, creating connections that transcended ordinary understanding. Jonathan held the photograph before him, watching as the symbols on its reverse side synchronized perfectly with the patterns emerging around them. His earlier visions now appeared as glimpses of this moment, pieces of a puzzle that was finally coming together. The wolf's presence served as living proof of the supernatural forces at work in the forest. Richard studied the ancient documents with renewed insight, recognizing descriptions that matched exactly what they were witnessing. The Forest Guardian's influence was unmistakable in the way the symbols responded to their presence, creating patterns of light that spoke of protection and unity. Each new manifestation aligned perfectly with the texts he had discovered in the abandoned cabin. The bracelet on Emily's wrist continued its mysterious communion with the stone circle, sending out waves of energy that connected with each ancient marker. The wolf remained close to her, its golden eyes alert to every new development in the supernatural display. Together, they formed the heart of a phenomenon that bridged the gap between the ordinary world and something far more profound. Jonathan moved closer to his daughter, drawn by the pulling force of the energies that filled the space. The burden of his earlier actions lifted completely as he witnessed the forest's power at work. Each glowing symbol seemed to speak of redemption and renewal, of family bonds that could be strengthened through understanding and acceptance. The wolf's movements created new connections in the web of light that surrounded them. Richard watched in amazement as the creature's actions matched the prophecies described in the Guardian's documents, bringing ancient predictions to life before their eyes. The forest itself seemed to respond to their gathering, holding its breath as the power continued to build. Emily's wheelchair remained at the exact center of the circle, positioned perfectly to channel the energy flowing through the ancient site. The bracelet's glow intensified with each passing moment, creating bridges of light that connected father, daughter, and grandfather in ways that defied ordinary explanation. The wolf's presence anchored them in this extraordinary experience, its calm demeanor suggesting that everything was unfolding as it should. The symbols on the ground shifted and changed, revealing deeper truths about protection, guidance, and the unbreakable bonds of family. Each new pattern that emerged strengthened the connection between them, healing old wounds and creating new understanding. The wolf's golden eyes reflected these changes, its gaze holding wisdom that spanned generations. Jonathan's visions had guided them to this moment, though he hadn't understood their purpose until now. The photograph he carried had been more than just a mysterious object. It was a key that helped unlock the ancient power contained within the stone circle. The wolf's presence confirmed the authenticity of everything they were witnessing. Richard's knowledge of the forest, combined with the insights from the ancient documents, helped them interpret the meaning behind each new symbol that appeared. The Guardian's presence, though invisible, was undeniable in the way the forest responded to their gathering. Every illuminated pattern brought them closer to understanding the true purpose of their reunion. The wolf moved between them with increasing purpose, its actions guiding the flow of energy that filled the sacred space. The ancient power that pulsed through the forest was reaching its peak, using symbols and light to communicate truths that transcended ordinary understanding. Together, they stood at the threshold of a revelation that would forever change their perception of family, faith, and the mysterious forces that guided their lives. The ancient stones resonated with power as the final stage of their gathering began to unfold. Emily's bracelet cast light in intricate patterns, connecting every symbol within the circle in a complex web of illumination. The black wolf stood protectively beside her wheelchair, its golden eyes reflecting the supernatural display that surrounded them. Richard and Jonathan watched in awe as the forest's power manifested in its fullest form. The symbols beneath their feet had come alive, creating patterns that moved like living things across the ground. The wolf's presence seemed to amplify these manifestations, its very being attuned to the ancient force that filled the clearing. Jonathan held the photograph with trembling hands, watching as the symbols on its reverse side pulsed in perfect harmony with those illuminated around them. His visions now made complete sense. They had been glimpses of this sacred moment, preparing him for a truth that transcended ordinary understanding. The wolf's golden eyes met his with profound recognition. Richard carefully preserved the documents from the cabin as they witnessed the Guardian's influence manifesting before them. Each new pattern that emerged matched the ancient texts perfectly, confirming truths that had been hidden for generations. The wolf's movements aligned with every description he had read, bringing legend into reality. Emily felt the bracelet's warmth spreading through her entire being as it responded to the stone circle's energy. The wolf moved closer to her wheelchair, its fur brushing against her arm in a gesture of protection and guidance. The symbols beneath them glowed with increasing intensity, creating connections that bound them all together in ways they were only beginning to understand. The forest around them had grown preternaturally still, as if every tree and creature was bearing witness to something sacred. The standing stones cast shadows that moved independently of the sun's position, adding another layer to the complex patterns that filled the circle. The wolf's attention shifted between these manifestations, its behavior indicating that each new development was significant. Jonathan stepped closer to Emily, drawn by an invisible force that seemed to flow between them. The guilt of his earlier actions had completely dissolved in the face of this greater purpose, replaced by an understanding that transcended ordinary emotional bonds. The wolf's presence served as a bridge between the physical and spiritual aspects of their reunion. Richard recognized patterns from the Guardian's documents appearing in ever more complex configurations around them. The ancient power that flowed through the forest was revealing itself fully, using symbols and light to communicate truths that words could never express. The wolf's movements became more deliberate, each step triggering new revelations in the illuminated patterns. Emily watched in wonder as her bracelet created connections between herself and the ancient stones, each pulse of light revealing another layer of meaning in the symbols that surrounded them. The wolf remained faithfully by her side, its golden eyes reflecting the supernatural display that continued to unfold. Their position at the center of the circle seemed increasingly significant as the power reached its peak. The ground beneath them trembled slightly as the final symbols emerged from beneath centuries of accumulated forest debris. The wolf moved with increased purpose, its actions guiding the flow of energy that filled the space. Each new pattern that appeared brought them closer to understanding the true nature of their gathering. The photograph in Jonathan's hands now pulsed with the same energy that flowed through the stone circle, its symbols perfectly aligned with those that surrounded them. The wolf's presence confirmed that everything was proceeding according to some greater design, a plan that had been set in motion long before any of them were born. The bonds between father, daughter, and grandfather had grown stronger than ever, fortified by the ancient power that flowed through the forest. The wolf's golden eyes held the final secrets yet to be revealed, guiding them through this extraordinary experience with patience and wisdom. Together, they stood on the brink of understanding the full magnitude of their sacred reunion. The stone circle blazed with supernatural light as Emily's bracelet reached its full power. The black wolf stood majestically beside her wheelchair, its golden eyes reflecting the culmination of ancient forces at work. Richard and Jonathan witnessed the final manifestation of the Forest Guardian's power as the symbols completed their intricate dance around them. The ground beneath them illuminated with unprecedented intensity, revealing a complete pattern that connected every symbol within the circle. The wolf moved with deliberate purpose, touching specific points within the pattern with its paws, causing waves of light to ripple outward from each contact. Emily felt the bracelet's energy reaching its peak, creating a bond between them all that transcended ordinary understanding. Jonathan held the photograph before him one last time, watching as the symbols on its reverse side aligned perfectly with the completed pattern beneath their feet. His visions had led them to this moment of profound revelation, where the mystery of their gathering finally became clear. The wolf's golden eyes met his with an expression of ancient wisdom, acknowledging the completion of his journey. Richard carefully folded the documents from the cabin, no longer needing their guidance as the truth manifested before them. The forest guardian's presence, though invisible, filled the clearing with undeniable power. Each symbol glowed with purpose, telling the story of protection, guidance, and family bonds that had brought them together. Emily watched in wonder as the bracelet created final connections between the standing stones, completing the circuit of ancient power. The wolf remained faithfully by her side, its presence a constant reminder of the guardian's protection. The wheelchair that had once seemed a limitation now sat at the heart of something miraculous, channeling energies that united them all. The forest around them resonated with power as the final pieces fell into place. Jonathan approached his daughter, understanding at last that his actions, though seemingly misguided, had been necessary to bring them to this moment of truth. The wolf moved between them, its golden eyes reflecting the light of recognition and forgiveness that passed between father and daughter. Richard witnessed the completion of the ancient prophecy he had read about in the cabin's documents. The guardian's symbols had drawn them together, tested their bonds, and ultimately strengthened their connection in ways that would endure long after this moment passed. The wolf's presence confirmed every word of the ancient texts, bringing legend into reality. The bracelet on Emily's wrist pulsed one final time, sending out a wave of light that touched each of them in turn. In that moment, they understood the true purpose of their gathering, not just to heal their family bonds, but to become part of something larger, something that had watched over these woods for countless generations. The wolf moved to the center of the circle, its golden eyes meeting each of theirs in turn. Its purpose as the guardian's messenger had been fulfilled, guiding them through their separate trials to this moment of unity. The symbols around them glowed with a steady light now, no longer shifting, but standing as permanent markers of their experience. Jonathan reached for Emily's hand, feeling the last traces of guilt fade away as the forest's power embraced them. Richard stood beside them, the three generations united by something far stronger than the challenges that had tested them. The wolf watched over their reunion, its presence a blessing from the ancient force that had brought them together. As the supernatural light began to soften, the symbols remained visible, but more subtle, permanently etched into the forest floor as a reminder of their experience. The bracelet on Emily's wrist retained a gentle glow, a lasting connection to the guardian's power. The wolf moved slowly around the circle one final time, its golden eyes reflecting the profound change that had taken place within each of them. Together, they stood in the sacred circle, transformed by their experience but stronger for having faced it as a family. The forest guardian's presence would remain with them, a reminder that some bonds transcend ordinary understanding, and that ancient powers still move through the world, guiding those who need protection and wisdom most. Dear listeners, we hope this journey through the mystical Adirondack forest has touched your hearts. The story of Emily, Jonathan, and Richard reminds us that family bonds can transcend any challenge when guided by forces greater than ourselves. If you've enjoyed this tale of mystery and redemption, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel and leave a like on this video. For more enchanting stories that explore the depths of family connections and ancient mysteries, click on the recommended playlist to your left. Share your thoughts about the Guardian's power in the comments below. We'd love to hear what this story means to you. Remember, every forest holds its secrets and every family has its own guardian angel. Until our next adventure, stay blessed and protected.